Fair warning, this video discusses death and child abuse. It's a terrible understatement to assess the relationship between Craig and his dad as a rough one or complicated. And yet, complicated matches it to a T. When we first meet Craig, it's very easy to get behind him and join him in hating his dad, especially with how visceral the child abuse scenes in those 2 episodes are. It is genuinely uncomfortable to watch, and to be frank, I hate having to watch those 2 episodes every time I do a rewatch. When I get around to making my list of tough to watch Degrassi episodes, When Doves Cry will totally be up towards the top. Craig's dad didn't just hit him, he beat him. And nowhere is it best displayed than in that short scene where Craig is looking over the wounds of the previous night. But part of what makes this so complicated is the man is, at the end of the day, still Craig's dad. There's still the history of it being just Craig and his dad, the 2 of them versus the world, especially after Craig's mom, 1, left his dad, and then 2, left the earth. And it's often hard to ignore the bond that forms, sometimes against our will, with the people we call parent. And Craig very much has that. It's part of what leads him to try to let his dad back in his life. Even though Ashley's the one to suggest it, I get the sense that Craig very much wants to believe that his dad has actually changed. Even though we know that Craig is still frightened of his dad, as we can see in the wonderfully directed scene where he's terrified of how his dad's going to react to him not using a coaster, he wants to believe his dad when he says that he's changed, that it's not going to be like before. But we also know that Craig isn't quite ready to take the leap and assume that everything's just going to be alright. He could go back to his dad's house and he won't have to worry about someone chasing after him with a golf club because he spoke to someone he wasn't supposed to. But both fortunately and unfortunately, this bit of caution leads to the final unraveling of their relationship. It's hard to watch Craig's dad just go back to the person who we met at the beginning of season 2, and especially hard for Craig. But in it, we can see that Craig's changed. He's in a better place now, a place where he feels that he can fight back and defend himself at least. He can talk back to his dad, throw his crap back in his face, and have the wherewithal to recognize that it's not his fault that his dad beats him. His dad is the problem. And then his dad is just gone, out of his life. And for all of us who were right there with Craig, despising this man, on a level, we're happy that he's gone. That means, at least physically, he can't hurt Craig. But that's the thing. He physically can't hurt Craig anymore, but there's still his legacy. The mark that Mr. Manning left on Craig. It's still there, even though he's gone. It's part of what leads Craig to laugh when people try to romanticize his relationship with his dad or understate the severity of what went on between them. It's part of why he feels like he needs to just carry on, forget mourning. He's glad that this tyrant is out of his life. This even goes so far to the point where he jokes about it. He fakes out Jimmy and Marco by at first claiming to be in the car with his dad when it happened, and then just laughing it off, telling them, hey, take a joke. And this especially is where we get the sense that everything really isn't right with Craig. He's an overfilled balloon ready to pop, and the explosion comes when he realizes that he misses his dad. As I said, bonds can form people, even people who you have the worst relationship with. Even though Craig had all these legit reasons to hate his dad, he still loves him. It's the part of him that wanted his dad to change and wanted him to be in his life. And when it finally hits that he won't ever get to see his dad again, then these 2 conflicting emotions collided. It's a mixture of anger and sadness all at the same time, and you don't know which one you should listen to. And even though people tried and wanted to help, it's really hard to do so unless you've at least vaguely gone through something similar. And that's why Terry was so helpful here. She was able to recognize what Craig was going through and was able to take her experience with her own mom's passing and try to use it to help Craig. I think my favorite scene of this 2-parter is where Terry is describing when she found out her mom was dead. She was mad not because her mom was dead, but because her dad came to take her away from a birthday party before she got to play pin the tail on the donkey. Even though it's especially true when you're young, death is hard to take. Again, it's hard to come to terms with the fact that that person is just gone. There's no final farewell or closure like there is in the movies. They're just out of your life. And I think this episode is a really good one for Mr. Raditch as well. He gets a lot of flack for some of the things he does in Degrassi Next Generation, but this is a shining moment of why I loved him as a teacher and vice principal in Degrassi High and Junior High. He saw Craig tear up the dance poster, but he didn't go to punish him or kick him out of the school. What he told people was to get back in the dance and let Craig cool off. He'll check on him later. And when he did go to check on Craig, he was able to recognize that Terry was helping him. She was being a good, calming influence on Craig. So who is he to try to disrupt it? And unless they did it off screen, it didn't look like Craig got any punishment at all for how he acted. Again, because Mr. Raditch saw what he was going through. And it's not always the case, but sometimes you need to just get your emotions out in a burst like that. So again, good on you, Mr. Raditch. This hasn't had a lot of effects on Craig after this two-parter that ended season 2, but one place in particular where it did was in Craig's longing to have a family when he found out that Manny was pregnant. Even though he had Joey and Angela, Craig still in a way felt that he didn't have a family anymore. But now with Manny and a baby on the way, it was an opportunity to build one. And I might be reading too much into it, but he probably also saw it as an opportunity to be better than his dad, sort of proving to himself that the apple can fall far from the tree. Which all the more made it devastating when Manny decided to have an abortion. And though Craig didn't take it well and was not at all in line when he was insisting Manny go through the pains of carrying a baby to term and then go through labor just so he can have a kid, you can still kind of understand why he felt that way. But of course, understanding why someone feels a particular way is not justification for them feeling it. So, I often talk about how Degrassi is a sort of learning tool and guide for things that might occur in a person's life and how one might deal with it. And I never really felt it to be more true than recently. In this past month, I lost my mom. And kind of like Craig, I had a very complicated relationship with her. I don't really want to go into detail, but needless to say, one of the healthiest things I did for myself was move out, even though it was to a new state and I had no plan ahead of me. And so like Craig, when the news finally came, it didn't really fully hit. I could repeat it over and over to myself and it didn't really ring true. And to think about how confused I might be if I didn't have the memory of Craig going through something else in my head, it's kind of scary, but then also reassuring because I do have this sort of guideline for things that might occur, how I might feel, and the fact that it's not necessarily wrong. I'm not crazy for having these emotions that some people might view as inappropriate right now. And though I've not yet gotten to the point of breaking down, I at least have a sort of shadow of an idea of what it might be like when I do. Because of these episodes, it's something that I know to expect or at least be prepared for. And when it does finally come, I know that I need to make sure to take a step back from my day-to-day life and let myself mourn a bit. Degrassi never feels more real than when you can see yourselves in the characters and you can directly relate to the experiences that the people on the show face. And that's one of the reasons why talking about death in Degrassi and Degrassi tackling this topic at all is super important. No matter who we are or where we are in life, at some point we're going to have to deal with death. And so having that reassurance or a sort of layout of what you might expect is really helpful and comforting in a way the people around you might not be able to be. Thank you ever so much for consuming this video. I've noticed a few people have mentioned wanting to get in contact with me to talk about Degrassi one-on-one. And if you got a Twitter account, you can do that there. You can find me at NotAVampyre. And again, like with YouTube comments, I may be slow at responding, but I will respond to you. For the time being at least, I'm open to private messages or just at replies. Thank you again for consuming this video, and until next time.